Kia ora koutou. Yeah, thanks for coming along to the candidate information presentation today. It's my hope that after today you'll know everything you need to know about how to become a candidate. How do you submit your nomination, and how does the voting process work, and how does campaigning work, and all of the administrative parts of the election process. After I speak, there's some more exciting presentations that are coming later, so don't be alarmed if I'm a little boring. The excitement is coming. We'll go on to the next slide, next couple of slides. Yep, and we'll keep going. All right, so some key terms to start us off, just so you know what I'm talking about. There's two elections or two organisations that are holding elections. All right. Ooh, very cool. Right, so the Stratford District Council, that's where we are, and the Taranaki Regional Council. Two different organisations, two different sets of elections, all happening at the same time. The people who are eligible to vote are called electors. So these are adults who have enrolled on the electoral roll. They may be on the general roll or the Māori electoral roll, and we'll talk about the difference pretty soon. Timeline yesterday is when nominations opened. So yesterday is when you can officially become a candidate. If you don't have a nomination form already, get one from council or go to their website or contact us or jump online. We've got an online nominations portal where you can submit your nomination. 4 weeks from now, nominations will close right on the dot at 12 noon. So we do encourage you to get your nominations in early. The last thing you want is to be in the line at 12 noon, only to find that there's an issue with it. Your nomination is valid and you don't have time to, sorry, your nomination is invalid and you don't have time to get it corrected. So we encourage you to get your nomination in early, just in case there are any issues. It's a postal election, and from the 9th of September, electors will begin receiving their voting packs in the post. There's about a 2-week period where people will be receiving their voting packs in the post. Not everyone's going to get their vote on the same day. Even if they live in the same household, they may not receive their vote in the mail on the same day. But from that 22nd of September date, everyone on the roll at the right address should have received their vote. So we encourage you to check your details with the Electoral Commission. Make sure that they've got your right address so that when voting opens, you get your vote in the mail. Voting is then going to close at 12 noon on the 11th of October. And shortly after that, we will release a progress result. This might contain around about 85% of the votes. So when you get that progress result, just keep in mind it's not final. It doesn't necessarily mean you've been elected or not elected. The next day, you will be able to see the preliminary result. And that might have about 98% of the vote. That's all the ordinary votes except for the special votes. It will give you a better idea of whether you have been successful, but it's not until the 17th of October that we will declare the final result, and that's when you know for sure whether you have been elected. So the Stratford District Council is what I'll talk about first. Population of 10,500 people and 7,000 electors. 6,500 are on the general roll, 400 are on the Māori roll. Candidates are going to be listed in alphabetical order by surname. So if your surname starts with A, you'll probably be at the top of the list of candidates. There's also going to be a Māori ward poll with the election, and that will determine whether the Māori ward is disestablished or retained. Talk about that in just a moment. Next up is the Taranaki Regional Council, a bit bigger than the Stratford District Council. Population of 130,000 people and 90,000 electors. 82,500 of these are on the general roll and 7,500 on the Māori roll. They'll also list their candidates in alphabetical order by surname, and they'll also have a Māori constituency poll. Elections that are required. So these are the positions you can stand for the Stratford District Council. Of course, you can stand for the mayor, only one of those. There's 11 councillors, 10 general ward councillors, and 1 Māori ward councillor. 4 from the Stratford Rural General Ward and 6 from the Stratford Urban General Ward. Taranaki Regional Council, got 11 councillors. Mike will talk a little bit more about the different constituencies and how many councillors are elected from each constituency. If you haven't seen a map of Stratford, there it is. Pretty sure you're familiar with the district. 2 wards, one is in blue and one is in green. Regional constituencies, I'll also leave that to Mike to show you that map. Hot topic this time around is the Māori ward and constituency polls. It's the first time that I've been involved with elections where there have been polls like this. Each organisation will have their own poll. So for the Stratford District Council, it will be to keep or remove Stratford Māori ward. Taranaki Regional Council, it will be to keep or remove Taranaki Māori constituency. So on your voting document, you'll have 2 separate polls. You can vote the same way for both, or you can vote differently for either, or you don't have to vote for them at all. Both of these polls are binding, so the outcome will depend on which of the options gets a simple majority of the votes. Council won't have a choice but to enforce the outcome, and that outcome will be in place from the 2028 election and will also apply for the 2031 election. So if you're elected to the Māori ward of Stratford District Council, you will serve the 2025 to 2028 term regardless of the outcome. It only comes into force from the 2028 term. Just an idea of what it will look like. So like I said, 2 separate polls. You can vote to keep or remove the Māori ward and or the Māori constituency. They're not going to be side by side on the voting document because the issues will be grouped by the organisation. So you'll have all the Stratford District Council issues, including their poll. Then you'll have the Taranaki Regional Council issues, including their poll. Electoral system, both organisations use the easy to use first past the post electoral system. You're probably already familiar with it. You just tick the options that you want to vote for. You vote by ticking the candidate names. Candidates with the highest votes wins, so relatively straightforward. Just don't vote for more candidates than there are positions. So for the mayoral election, you just vote for 1 candidate. It's the Stratford Urban Ward or the Stratford Rural Ward. You can vote for as many candidates as there are vacancies. Eligibility, relatively straightforward. You've just got to be a New Zealand citizen, aged 18 or over, and on the parliamentary electoral roll. You can be on the roll anywhere in the country. Doesn't matter where you are. You do have to be nominated by 2 people who are enrolled in the area that you are standing for. So if you're standing for the Stratford Rural General Ward, you've got to make sure that both of your nominators are on the general roll in the Stratford Rural Ward area. If you stand for the Taranaki Māori constituency, your 2 nominators must be enrolled on the Māori roll somewhere within the Taranaki region. Another way of thinking about this is that your 2 nominators must be eligible to vote in the election that you're standing for. Should have pointed out that if you've got any questions, feel free to interrupt me, even if it's about a previous slide. I don't really mind, or you can save until the end, that's fine as well. You can stand for multiple positions, so if you want to stand for mayor and a council, you can do that. If you're elected to both, you take the mayoral position. You just can't stand for more than 1 ward or for the district council and the regional council at the same time. Another thing here is that elected members or their spouses can't have contracts with council over 25 grand without approval. So if that applies to you or may apply to you, recommend you seek advice before the election. You can also be a council employee and be a candidate, but if you're elected, you've got to resign from council. You also can't nominate yourself. So your 2 nominators must meet the criteria for being nominators, but beyond that, they can be anyone, family, friends, wife, children, just not yourself. Nomination process. There are quite a lot of resources up the front, so you've probably already got a copy of the candidate information handbook. It'll give you pretty much everything you need to know to be a candidate, including just about everything that I'm saying here. There's also PDF copies on the council's website if you'd like to get yourself one of those. Goes over quite a lot of things, including the relevant electoral legislation, all the rules, guidelines, election offences, and everything else. 3 different ways you can submit your nomination. The easiest way is to do it online. You can go to the link here. It's also in the candidate information handbook, and it will let you submit your nomination online. It's probably how I would do it if I were going through this process. Make your account, do everything online, don't have to worry about paper or anything like that. If you want to do it by the hard copy form, that's also fine. So you can get one from council, from their website. You can probably get it from their editable PDF from their website too. So you can fill it in on your computer, then you've got to print it out, get it signed and submitted. If you choose to do it online, there's no printing or handwriting or scanning. Upload your photograph, upload your statement, instantly confirm that your nominators are eligible. One thing that sometimes happens is that people submit their nominations in person and then they find out that their nominator is not enrolled or enrolled in the wrong area. So this portal will confirm your nominator's eligibility when you're entering in their details, which you might find helpful. Question?
Yeah. On these paper forms,
yes.
In order to write with a pen, right? And for people, because that's a typed one, obviously, because it's online.
Yep.
So we do want a PDF submitted with your paper, or does somebody go in and rewrite what you did?
If you're doing a handwritten, if you're doing a handwritten run, we've got to retype it.
Okay.
Yep. If you're doing it online, of course, you can just type it in or copy it from Microsoft Word or whatever. If you're doing a hard copy form, you could also print off your statement and staple it to your hard copy form. That'll make it easier for us to read when we're retyping it. Yeah. Or you could handwrite it and we just read it and write it. When you submit your nomination, you've got to pay a $200 deposit per position that you stand for. So if you stand for multiple positions, you've got to pay that $200 deposit for each position. And if you're doing your nomination in person, you might pay by cash or EFTPOS. If you do it via the portal, you can just make your transfer by bank transfer. The 150-word candidate statement, that's optional, so you don't have to supply it. You probably want to, most candidates do. It's going to go out to all of the voters. You can also supply a Te Reo Māori translation of that statement. As long as it's substantially consistent, you can have a translation of that statement. Photograph, it's also optional. Most candidates do provide one. You likely do want to make it a good quality one as well. Colour, ideally. It's going to go out to all the voters. We do require evidence of your citizenship. So if you're doing it via the portal, you just upload a scan of your passport or birth certificate. If you're submitting your nomination in person, just make a photocopy of your passport or whatever it is, so that we know you are a New Zealand citizen. Now, you can be affiliated with a political party or group. Maybe you've been endorsed by a party or you're associated with a group and you want it to show on your profile that you're part of that group. That's fine. You declare that on your nomination form and you supply a letter from that group that gives you permission. Maybe it's from like I said, a party or some kind of group. You just need a letter from them saying that they give you permission to use that affiliation. You don't have to be affiliated. You can have nothing showing under your name, or you can have the word independent. You want to show that you're specifically not associated with the group, you can have the word independent. You don't need a letter if you're independent. Some things about your affiliation we're going to be checking. One, that you've got your letter. It's not a slogan like vote for me, and it's not indecent. It's not slanderous. Dale will make a ruling if it's slanderous. Your profile does need to show whether your principal place of residence is in the area that you're standing for. You could live outside of the Stratford area, but be standing for Stratford District Council, but your profile will show that your place of residence is not in the area that you're standing for. It's the same thing about if you're standing for any other positions, just got to show that in your profile. We don't count that in the 150 words, it just shows up above your statement. Now, we do want to emphasise again that nominations close 12 noon sharp on the 1st of August. I've said it already, but please don't leave it to the last minute. You just don't want to be in the queue right as nominations are closing, only to find that your nomination is not valid. There's no provision for you to go away after the nominations have closed to get something corrected. This will show you what it looks like in the candidate profile. This person's got an affiliation, photo, principal place of residence is in the area that they're standing for. They're also standing for another position, and there's their statement. On the other hand, this candidate doesn't have a photo, doesn't have a statement, no affiliation, so that's what it looks like. Voter eligibility, let's talk about what you can vote for. Depends on which role you're on. If you're on the general role, you can vote for the mayor, 4 to 6 general ward councillors, depending on which ward you happen to live in. You can vote for 1 general constituency councillor, and you can vote for 2 polls. If you're on the Māori electoral roll, similar. The only difference is that your ward councillor vote will be for the Māori ward, and your constituency councillor vote will be for the Māori constituency. Everyone gets to vote for the mayor, and everyone gets to vote for both polls. Campaigning is another exciting one. It can start whenever you want. You can start campaigning now if you'd like. There is an election signs policy. Every council has an election signs policy. So Stratford District Council has their own policy. You can read about that in the handbook or go to council's website. Mostly it relates to when signs can be displayed in public places, when you've got to remove them, sizes, and all the rest. If you are putting up a sign outside of the Stratford District Council area, make sure you read the relevant council's election signs policy. All election advertisements, whether they're a sign or a Facebook post or a website, if it's promoting your candidacy, you need to have an affiliation statement. An authorization statement. That's just a little sentence that explains who has authorized the advertisement and how to get in contact with that person. So it might say authorized by your name and then your phone number. Could also have your email address or a PO box. Doesn't need to be your physical address anymore, just a way to contact you. Social media is a pretty common way of campaigning. If you're going to set up a Facebook page for your candidacy, you don't need to put your authorization statement on every single post. Just put it somewhere on your Facebook page, maybe in your bio or in your About Us page. There's obvious reasons why you might want to campaign online. Quite cost effective, get out there, promote yourself. Stay away from fake news and stay away from council's social media channels. They're for council's use, not for campaigning. Council is going to remove any inappropriate political or campaigning material. Also, keep safe on the internet. I probably don't need to tell you this, but these days you combine the internet with politics, and sometimes unpleasant things happen, so stay safe online. Donations, there are some rules about donations and expenses that you need to be aware of. Gotta keep a record of donations so that you can declare them after the election. There is a donations and expenditure return that you have to file after the election. So keep a record of anyone who has donated to your campaign. If you don't know who has donated to your campaign and it's anonymous donation, can't be more than $1,500. It is unlikely that you will receive an anonymous donation in this day and age, but if you can't reasonably determine who has given you money, then you can list that as an anonymous donation. There's no limit on how much you can raise, but there is a limit on how much you can spend. And that is dependent on the position that you're standing for. All of the positions have an expenditure limit that is dependent on the population of that area. I won't read them all out, but you can read them all in the candidate information handbook. Most candidates don't come close to the limit. If you think you're coming close to the limit or you're not sure if something needs to be declared, you can get in contact with us and we'll talk you through these issues. A couple of other things about campaign spend. The expenditure limits include GST and you can't add them together. So if you're going to stand for mayor and council, you take the mayoral limit, you don't combine them together. Like I said, you've got to declare this by the 11th of December. So that's a declaration. It comes with your nomination form, but you don't submit it when you file your nomination. You submit it after the election, once you've filled it out with any donations and expenditure. If you don't spend anything and you don't raise anything, you still need to submit that declaration. It's just a nil declaration, but you still must submit it. Other thing here, they are available for public inspection. So just keep that in mind. For 7 years, these declarations are available for public inspection, and you want to make sure that they are accurate. What you don't want is one of your competitors to track down your declaration and make a complaint that you've misfiled something. Then we get on to voting. This is the fun part. So voting is going to open on the 9th of September. About a 5-week voting period. It's a little bit longer than it's been in recent elections, mostly due to a decline in postal service, but there's a longer voting period this time. You can campaign up to and including election day, and special votes are available at some council locations. So if you haven't received your vote by the 22nd of September, or you've lost your vote, or you've spoiled your vote, come into council and get a special vote. You can also call our office if you want us to post out a special vote. Special votes are a little bit more complex. They require a declaration. It's a little bit of a hassle. Best thing for you to do is make sure your address is accurate on the electoral roll so you get your ordinary vote in the mail. We are going to publish a return schedule on council's website that will just allow you to keep track of voting, how it's going. You'll notice that most of the voting tends to happen in the last few days. You can go out and get people to vote for you, ask them to vote for you, just don't collect their votes. You don't want to be collecting votes from anyone and returning them. People are going to return their own votes. They do not have to be posted back, although it is a postal election and you can drop your vote into a post box. You can also drop it into a ballot box. There's probably will be a ballot box here at council's office. Read all the locations in the handbook on council's website, and you can use a ballot box. Voting is going to close sharp at 12 noon on election day. Ballot boxes will be sealed. We won't accept any votes after 12 noon on election day. And then the results, like I said, the progress result is not final. It's only going to have about 90% of the vote. So please don't go out and celebrate on election day because you think you've been elected. It's possible that you might be elected as per the progress result, but not the following day when the provisional result comes out. You'll be contacted when that progress result is released, so you can expect to hear from council as to the outcome of that progress result, preliminary result the following day, and then the final results on the 17th of October. If you're elected, you'll take office the day after the public notice. So we expect that to be on the 18th of October, but you can't act until you're sworn in at the first meeting after your election. Some resources, like I said, they're available just up here on the desk. You can also go to council's website to access information. The pre-election report is a really good read. Most of the legal stuff that you need to know is in the handbook, but you can also access the legislation if you want. attend a council meeting. It's probably a good way to find out what it's like to be a councillor, as well as reading the agendas and the minutes that they publish. Or you could talk to a council staff member. For anything else, Dale Ofsoske is the electoral officer, and we at the election office would be happy to answer any questions, provide any information if you need it. Raylene Johnson is the deputy electoral officer from Stratford District Council, and she's also available as well. Now, I'm more than happy to take any questions if you've saved them up until this point. Otherwise, we'll be handing over. Yes.
Just for those that aren't aware, I don't know, I wasn't aware of this, but the pecuniary interest, they were called pecuniary interests, once you become a council councillor. Are you going to discuss that, or is that somebody else? Or?
No.
What has to be disclosed and blah, blah, blah.
That's a Sven. Yeah, that's council specific.
Yeah, that would be a procedural item, but normally we only go there.
So I think Ben already kind of touched on it in his slide when he talked about that limit of business you can do with the council as an elected representative, and it being $25,000, including GST, was that limit, and anything over that you need authority from the Auditor General's office to conduct that business. So yeah, there are procedural rules around what you can and can't interact with the council as a councillor.
Yeah, no, that wasn't what I was
It's
meaning.
probably the conflict of interest. Probably the conflict of interest side of things that I suspect.
Well, when you become a councillor, I didn't know this, but when you have to list all your assets and all those sorts of things. That's the big human interest, isn't it?
Yeah.
Each year it gets listed. So just so people are aware of that.
Yeah. So that's a natural part of the process. If you're an elected member, just to ensure transparency, that the community is aware of what your personal interests are. And when it comes to voting, to ensure that there's no overlap between your personal benefit and the community benefit, there is a standing conflict, or there's a standing pecuniary interest register that spells those out. Equally, you can't foresee every circumstance that might come up that might interact with some of your personal interests. And as a result, at the beginning of each council meeting, there is another opportunity to actually identify any conflicts you might have with any matters that are in the agenda in that particular case. So the standing one is obvious. It's sort of that you own property within the district, that you might own a business within the district and the like. But then it is more on the meeting by meeting ones. It is more the direct impact that a report that might have, or an interaction a report might have with some aspect of your life. So we're going through that as part of the induction process.
All right.
Cool. You get a break?
Yeah.
I'm not sure that I'm going to live up to the more exciting aspect of it, but I think we're going to do a bit of Council 101. Who is it we are and what is it we are doing? So we're going to cover Stratford District Council first, and then we're going to hear from Mike later in a similar exercise for the Regional Council. It's slow, hang on. All right. What is it that we do? I suspect most people that are in the room have a fairly good understanding what council actually does, as you found your way here today. But the list on the left, it's by no means comprehensive. And looking out of the window, the first thing that's actually not on the bullet point list is civil defence, which is something we've sort of spent our last couple of days doing more than most other things. Having said that, civil defence is actually sort of at the, 7 o'clock position of that circle on the left. That circle tries to show us for every $100 that council takes in rates, where does it go? So civil defence, for example, $2.53 of every $100 in some way go towards civil defence, and that was live and in action in the last few days. I would think that the bottom 5 of that bullet point list that's about on the left is probably the most what is in people's mind. We pick up your rubbish. If you're in the urban area, you get water supplied from us. If you're in the Stratford area, as in town, you get wastewater services, stormwater is throughout the district, roading is throughout the district, other than state highways. But then there's a whole lot of other things. We obviously provide sports and recreation facilities and parks. We do community development activities. There is this heading of democracy, which sometimes confuses people, but basically there's everything that keeps our political and decision-making governance processes together, that makes sure that we have meetings, that elected members are provided with the resources they require. We ensure that the process we follow are actually legally compliant, so the decisions that elected members make in the room can actually be upheld, and we're keeping everyone safe. And elected members have the information they require to make those decisions. Gemma is going to make these slides available on the website together with everything else. So, if you can't read bits, they will be available to you. All right, every 3 years we do a long-term plan, and the focus of that long-term plan changes quite notably from cycle to cycle. The last change was quite notable. It went from a quite an active spending period, which came sort of out of COVID and with a lot of government grants, into a far more restrained period, which sort of better reflects our current economic environment. And we pretty much ended on a back to the basics concept. So that is what the current long-term plan is. So be realistic is one of the main themes. So it is about our key infrastructure, key services. So those bottom 4 or 5 bullet points I sort of mentioned earlier, that's where that falls. One of the projects we've had on for a long time is Prospero Place, because it is a mix, or was a mix, of private and public land. There were a few processes to go through, but if you've seen our comms over the last while, you will have seen we're making progress in actually turning Prospero Place from the grass area it currently is into a proper town square. Council did a subdivision a few years ago, so one of the projects on the books is to do the next one of that. The intent of that is to be cost neutral. And the last time achieved that, in fact, it made a very small profit. Local water done well. Once again, if you are in this room, you've probably watched council closely enough over the last while to see that local water done well, which used to be 3 water reforms originally and got rebranded as local water done well on the change of government. That was one of the biggest decisions that has been made in this room for a long time. How are we going to deliver water services for the community going forward? Council has made committee has made a recommendation. It has yet to be adopted by full council next week, Tuesday. And then we will get on with implementing the outcome of that. And one theme that has been around for a few years now is that we are going through a lot of reforms driven by central government. And one of the key roles of council, one of the key activities of council currently is actually to engage in those reforms and make sure that when those pieces of legislation are passed, and local water done well was one of them, that they actually get turned into actions by council so that we remain compliant. Right, I'm not going to read all those out to you. It's just sort of a smorgasbord of sort of at the next level down, what is actually the stuff that is in the long-term plan. Every one of these was a decision in council. Probably every one of those was part of a workshop, some decision-making, some tweaking, some reconsideration later in the stage when the whole long-term plan came together, because usually when you throw everything in, you end up with a rates increase that then no one really wants. So you sort of go through multiple rounds of trimming, and those are the projects in the current financial year that sort of got the tick of approval by elected members that said, yeah, we really need to get on with that. And there are sort of a variety all across those activities we listed earlier. Right, we've got 2 slides here. The first one is the governance structure. Second one, if it catches up, is the organization structure. I think the biggest thing I'm going to try to do is actually explain what the difference between those 2 is, because I have a lot of conversations where members of the community try to figure out how, for example, I as a CE fit into the governance structure, or the other way around. Where do elected members fit into the operational side? And for most of those questions, the short answer is they don't. They're distinctively separate groups, but they actively interact with each other and each has their own role. So the governance is what we are talking about with this election process. The governance structure is all the people in there are elected. Ben spoke about the mayor and the councillor. So all of those roles following the election will be part of council as a whole. And then underneath, and that is basically your blue box, that is full council. And full council signs off all the decision making, or almost all of the decision making that comes out of the governance of this council, including long-term plans, decisions around local water done well, and a million of other things. Underneath full council, then sit committees. Most committees don't make decisions. Most committees deal with individual subject matters and make recommendations to full council. If you try to do everything through full council, you would be there all day and probably still run out of time. That's why it gets broken into smaller groups, and those groups individually deal with the matters at hand. They then make recommendations to full council, and full council adopts those. The committees that you see there at the moment is what we have right now. That doesn't mean that after the election that will be the same. There is a process where normally the mayor recommends a committee structure and a committee membership after an election. And there's a further process where councillors can interact with that if they agree or disagree or would like to see a tweak. So we'll go through that after the election, but that's our current format as it stands. So that is governance. That's what happens in this room. And then we get to the organization. So green box at the top is chief executive. The chief executive is actually the sole employee of council. So that's the connection point. It is council connects with the chief executive, and the chief executive then implements the decisions of council through the organization. We have got 4 individual departments: assets, environmental services, community services, and corporate services. You saw it earlier with the project list. Those individual departments look after those different activity types. Looking around the room, we've probably got staff members from at least 3 of those 4 departments here in the room today, together, working together, and that is very normal for most things we do. We're quite flat, we're quite small in our structure, and most things we do collaborative as a team. I'm going to grab some water, otherwise I'm going to keep coughing on you. I'm sorry for that. Right, see whether that helps. If there are any questions or I completely confuse people with Council 101, please put your hand up and I will try to put it into simpler terms. Right, we have seen that map before. Ben just showed us. Only difference, but again, Ben had those numbers. Little blue dot is your, well, it's not a difference. The only difference is that we've got the numbers of councillors listed against the map. But yeah, so little blue dot on the map, that is your urban ward, the rest is your rural ward. Interesting that that little blue dot actually gets more vote, or more representation in rural. That's purely down to how many people. It purely depends on how many people live in each of those areas, because the representation is on a ratio basis between elected and representatives. So I think we can probably move on from that. How much time is involved? I'm glad that I only have 1 elected member in the room, because that's usually the point where they say, hang on, I do a whole lot more than that. And I would totally agree with that. I would see this as baselines. We think those are numbers. Probably not. The mayor is easier to do because it is a single person and because he has an office in the building. We've got reasonably good understanding of it. So I think the mayor, that's quite a good representation. And equally, the thing to remember is your job never ends. It happens in the spaghetti aisle in the supermarket. It happens at the rugby game. It happens wherever you are. The job travels with you. And you need to be that sort of person that actually embraces that. Otherwise, you will find that really, really tricky. There has been a notable change with the mayoral job that's been recognized in the remuneration recently. that it used to be considered a part-time role. It used to be considered a part-time role, and a few years ago it got turned into a full-time job, because that's what it is, even for a small council. Here, one way or another, you're going to spend 40 hours on it, and if you don't spend it in 1 week, it's going to catch up with you the following week. Council laws, as I say, we consider that as a minimum number. If you want to actively engage in meetings, be able to have your say, be able to be heard, that's what you have to spend. There is no legal requirement for a councillor to spend any time on anything, and it isn't unheard of in many years ago, when we still sent out hard copy documents to elected members, that a councillor might turn up at a meeting, like at a council meeting, and the envelope only got opened on arrival. But I would probably argue that that is not ideal, and you're probably not going to be able to have the impact that you would want to have as a councillor. Those hours, those 10 hours per month we are putting there, we think that's what it takes you to get your head around what we're putting in front of you to be able to engage. You can do as much more as you like. You've seen the committee structure, and there, so you can try and get onto more of those things. There is a few community role appointments, which again you might choose. All of that goes over and above. Some elected members, councillors, reach out to staff prior to meetings to find out a bit more information. Staff tries to provide that as much as possible. So there's a whole range of different ways and means how there is engagement, and staff generally try to enable you to do your job as well as you can.
So it's been, because when I was on I might have changed now, but when I was on the Toka School Board,
yeah,
we had to like provide a monthly estimate of how much time we would spend doing all that. So there's
no such thing. No
obligation.
such thing. No.
Right.
Can I just, what is it, 10 hours is virtually underestimated by a lot of shots.
Yeah, no, that's
Yeah,
like,
and-
no, I understand that.
Yeah, and it's really, really hard to do. On one side, we're not trying to scare you out of the room and say, I can't do that time. And if you've got a bad month and everything at home has gone wrong, that's what you get away with, and you're not completely going to be out of fish out of water in the room. If you can't commit to that, you're probably going to struggle. Yep. Right. Again, similar to the committee structure, that's what we are doing at the moment. So it doesn't mean that the same is going to come through after the election, because that is all part of the discussion. Once the election has occurred, council has been sworn in. One of the next thing that happens is we're adopting a calendar of council meetings, and that is frequency, dates, and times of the day. If you look around the region or the country, councils do vastly different things. Councils do vastly different things. South Taranaki holds most of their meetings in the evening. We hold most of our meetings in the afternoon. Every once in a while, we have a need for a whole day meeting, but they are rare. They are normally around the long-term plan or things that attract significant submissions that therefore require time to give time to people who want to present to council. But yeah, those times are not set in stone. They need to be agreed by the new crop of elected members. But if you are in regular employment, there's something you need to take into consideration, how you can weave that in with the rest of your life. This leg is annoying. No, look at that. All right, what is it elected members do? For a start, the term elected members, I use it a lot because it's the only way to group together a mayor in council laws. The elected members sort of puts a circle around both of those. That's why I say elected members rather than councillors, because otherwise I exclude the mayor every time. So the key focus of elected members is to set policy and make sure that it is actually implemented. So decide what is going to be done and then hold officers to account that it is being done. And some of those policies over time show that what was thought a good idea at the beginning might not quite work in the real world. Any adjustments along the way fall into that role as well. The key decisions and key documents are the long-term plan. I touched on it. Slightly confusing. We do it every 3 years, but it covers 10 years. So after 3 years, you come back, you pick up the remaining 7 years, and you add 3 more to the back. So year 4 becomes year 1. It is basically to make sure that council goes in a reasonably straight line. But at every 3-yearly review, everything is up for discussion. You're not committed by what the previous council has decided. You can, if you want, completely change direction. Although I would suggest that there are some things we do that are unlikely to fundamentally change. But yeah, so long-term plan is a big one. Annual plan. Your long-term plan is the annual plan for year 1 of each of those 3-year cycles. But at year 2 and at year 3, we have an opportunity for a review. If nothing has materially changed, we can pretty much skip that, as in we still adopt it, but we don't need to go out to the community for consultation with it. If there is a notable change, and the COVID years were a classic where everything changed rapidly, then you might well be doing an annual plan every year. So first year long-term plan, second annual plan, third annual plan, then the next long-term plan, but you can do them lightly if it's reasonably straightforward. This year, the year just started 5 days ago, we didn't consult on the annual plan because it was exactly the same rates increase and pretty much the same direction as what was set in year 2 of the long-term plan. District plan. District plan is quite a different beast. It is basically your regulatory document that tells the community what can be done where. What can you do with your private property? What's a permitted activity? What needs resource consents? So it's all about location of various types of land use, industry versus rural versus residential, what heights you can build to, what densities you can build to, and so on and so forth. Meant to be done every 10 years. We were trying to do one for the last 3 years, and every time we start at the moment, the government goes into another rule review, and we say, well, until we know what the rules are, we can't really do our job. We've been doing that for the last at least 3 years, and we're really trying to get past that. But we're in the next round of reviews on those at the moment. Bylaws, you can find all our existing bylaws on our website. And yeah, what it says here, it's sort of, it's not quite law, it's sort of a local version of laws, and it tells you what you can and what you can't do, and it's everything from food to dogs to parking and the like. And then there is policies, which is sort of general processes, how we do things. So making sure that when a person comes to the front counter or in any other way engages with us, we treat them all the same, no matter who they are. It's all about fairness and transparency. Here comes the interesting bit. Hopefully not the main reason why people are here, because I don't think it stacks up that particularly well. And that is, what do you get paid? So these numbers get set centrally by government. Council has no influence. Well, council has no influence on the total amount. The mayor gets set independently by central government. So that number is totally outside council's decision making. The other numbers on that sheet come out of a total pool. Central government sets a total pool. I should have looked up what our current pool is, I can't remember. So let's say we get given $200,000 to remunerate elected members per year, and elected members can then between them decide how that gets split up. The mayor is already out, so that's not in, but between the 11 elected members, they can choose how they break it up. From the second row down is what you see, what is currently decided. There is one figure here that is a legal minimum, so it must not be at the moment less than that figure. But if you divided it, for example, equally, you would get a figure that is higher. And the idea behind that is, if councils want to recognize additional roles and responsibilities that might carry a bit more work, that is, they can do that. And Stratford District Council does that at the moment. We use a percentage or a fixed dollar figure to say that role is worth an extra $5,000 or an extra 20% or something like that, because it comes with more work. Councillors could, however, if they want to choose, to say we just take the total number and split it by 11. Would be another way. The methodology needs to be approved by central government. So we do that in a workshop, then pass a resolution to do so. We send it in to central government. And if it makes sense to them, they say, yep, that's fine. If it's completely erratic, they will come back and say, try again. So that's the remuneration side of being an elected member. On top of that, there's a couple of other things. We issue you with some equipment, such as the iPads that you require to see our agendas, but you also get an allowance to offset costs you might be incurring through cell phone, internet use and the like at home. That is about $800 or something like that, I think, a year, roughly in that ballpark. I think you can procure those services quite successfully within that amount. Right. If you are successful, taking office and training. So Ben, Dale touched on it earlier. So with the various dates, I won't go through those again. So you take office once the official results have been announced. However, at that point, you're not yet allowed to do something, because in the first meeting, you will be sworn in, you will be making your declaration, and it says so in the third bullet point, and that is then followed by quite a specific set of information we provide you on legal requirements and commitments and obligations, as well as sort of induction courses that are normally provided on an industry basis. So Local Government New Zealand, LGNZ, they provide standardized courses on what it is to be an elected member, how you're most effective. And I think they normally get really, really good feedback. We run those regionally, and the side effect that you get from them being run regionally is you actually can create a bit of a peer network with your colleagues up and down in the region, which elected members in general find can be quite helpful to sometimes check whether what they see in their own council, is that normal, is it an outlier, or is there something else they would like to understand. So it works quite well. And that brings me to the end. Has anyone got any questions? I'm quite happy otherwise to take them afterwards, either collectively or over a cup of coffee. But if there's anything that didn't make sense or wasn't clear, I'm happy to jump back to it. No? I think they're all sick of listening to me. I hand over to Mike for the Regional Council. That's the exciting part that Ben was talking about.
Here it comes.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Mike Nield tōku ingoa. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mike Nield. I'm the Director of Corporate Services at the Taranaki Regional Council. I'm going to run through a very similar briefing as you just had with Sven, but I'll focus on the exceptions rather than labouring the point and reiterating the commonalities. I'll focus on the differences, so you don't get too bored and I'm not up here speaking for an inordinate amount of time. So, sorry, I didn't catch that. So the Regional Council, what you saw with Sven's diagram, the circle, and he focused on the services that the District Council provides, very localised services, your local roads, water, rubbish, that sort of thing. The Regional Council is obviously looking at a range of services that are across the whole region and not specifically around one particular part of the region. The vast majority of our work is in the resource management area around the natural and built environment, and it's about sustainable use of resources. So there you can see there under that first indented bullet point, sustainable use, development and protection of Taranaki's natural and physical resources. Biggest chunk of our work is in that space. We've also got some responsibilities around safeguarding people and assets. We also take a role leading at a regional point of view where there's some benefit in the region acting in one voice. And whilst we're doing all of that, we've got partnership relationships and obligations under the Treaty of Waitangi Te Tiriti. So similar legislative framework, but different functions. They say a picture says 1,000 words. A short video will cover about 10,000 words, I reckon. So that we've got a very short video which gives you a flavour for some of the activities we're involved with. A lot of work around rivers, riparian planting, that sort of thing. Fresh water, quantity and quality management is part of our work. Public transport, port, stay in Taranaki. A lot of science-based work. Biosecurity and pest control work at the end there. Welcome, Ofsoske. Similar to Stratford District Council, we've got the full council there. Meets every 6 weeks, so generally eight meetings a year. We've got 3 committees there over to the left. Executive audit and risk, dealing with financial corporate services, risk management, those sorts of activities. Operations and regulatory, very hands-on work that we do, and our policy and planning division, obviously you're dealing with policy issues. Those are the 3 main committees that do the bulk of our work. They also meet on a 6-weekly cycle. They, similar to Stratford District Council, they've only got recommending powers. The full decisions are ratified by the full council. Those committees also have external representatives. So what we're trying to do with those committees is get as wide a set of views as we possibly can for the mahi that's being undertaken there. So what you'll get is iwi representatives, district council representatives, federated farmers representatives, that sort of additional representation to get that wide range of views. The rest of those committees, the Regional Transport Committee, Passenger Transport Joint Committee, State and Taranaki Joint Committee, Civil Defence and Solid Waste Management Committees, very topic specific as you can gather from the name. They're focused on that small area. They tend to meet 3 to 4 times a year and they tend to be workload driven. So if there's work to be done, the committee will meet. If there's not, then they won't. And then underneath that, we've got our organisational structure. Chief Executive Steve Ruru, exactly the same structure as Stratford District Council. That's the only person that's directly employed by the council. Myself and all the rest of the staff are employed by Steve. We've divided ourselves up into 4 areas: operations, resource management, environment quality, and corporate services. As you can see from that, slightly different focuses from the District Council because you're dealing with a different range of functions. The resource management and environment quality, heavily driven by our science teams. So the vast majority of our work is driven by environmental science. And I'm very happy to answer any questions as well as we go, if people have any. So what do? Sort of 40–50% of our work is in the resource management space. So a lot of regional planning, and in particular the land and freshwater plan are the big ticket items. Similar to Stratford District Council, it's the rule book by which people, industries, farmers, district councils, all the entities that operate can work within the region. Resource consent processing, compliance monitoring of those consents, responding to any non-compliance or any pollution events. And then, as I noted, there's a large science background with our state of the environment monitoring programs and environmental science investigations. So a lot of work being done by scientists jumping in rivers and doing air monitoring and the likes. I hate that photo because with my health and safety hat on, I just see people flying down rivers. Gives me the heebie-jeebies, but there you go. The second big chunk of our activities is in the catchment management area. And this is largely about working with landowners around things like riparian planting and fencing programs, our biosecurity and biodiversity programs, pest control, protecting native flora and fauna. Of recent years, we've been heavily involved with Predator Free 2050 Limited, doing the Towards Predator Free Taranaki project. And that's taking our traditional focus on possum control into mustelids, rats, all those sorts of things. And last but not least on there is the Waitara River Catchment Project, and that's quite a large chunk of funding we've received from the sale or freeholding of land in the Waitara urban area, and we're working with iwi and hapu on how that might develop into a program of works. We're responsible for public transport across Taranaki, both from a planning point of view and a delivery point of view. And we've got a small role in terms of navigation and safety obligations in and around Port Taranaki. Public transport services, the most obvious here in Stratford is the 4 times daily return Hawara to New Plymouth service, the connector service. That's the most successful of our rural services or non-New Plymouth services. The rest is really hard to get effective public transport services because you've got quite large areas, very small populations, and you don't have things like congestion and parking issues that make getting out of cars attractive. Very topical given the rain we've had in the last few days. We've got responsibilities for river and flood management, and we've got a number of flood control schemes, and we also participate with the district councils in civil defence and emergency management. I haven't heard everything of our feedback back from the last few days, but it appears that our flood control schemes, touch wood, have done their job, and we haven't had any significant non-surface flooding. I mentioned earlier we take a role and where we want to act as a regional voice, and this particularly comes out in our regional facilities. We look after Stadium Taranaki on behalf of the region, and also our 3 gardens, which we call them regional gardens, but I actually maintain they're probably of national, if not international significance, Tupari, Puketi and Hollowed Gardens. So, and on occasion, we're able to act and look at funding from a regional point of view rather than just a district point of view. Very pleasing that Stadium Taranaki, the repair and refurbishment project post the earthquake prone buildings problems have now been finished and the stadium's back up and running. We've also got, as we talked about earlier, a regional leadership and governance role. And the big ticket item there is we're the 100% owner of Port Taranaki Limited. And we receive dividends from the port every year, and we return those dividends to the ratepayers in the form of reduced rates. So each and every year you get a small slice of the profits of Port Taranaki back to you. very, very similar to the district council. We have our long-term plan, which sets our 10-year direction of travel, our strategic direction. And we have an annual plan each year, which is a subset of that. But we also have a range of resource management, biosecurity, transport, asset management plans, those sorts of things, which guide us in the delivery of our services. And they're the rule books by which we deliver our programs of work. So the big ticket item, and I'll touch on this shortly, is a new land and freshwater plan dealing with changes that are coming out of Resource Management Act reform. So what are the challenges ahead for the next 3 years of the council and the elected representatives we get in October? The big ticket item, as I've just mentioned, we've got a new Resource Management Act coming in later this year, next year, and that will significantly overhaul the way natural resources are managed across the whole country, but in particular, how we deal with land use and water use here in Taranaki, how we balance those conflicting needs for economic growth and development with the need to protect and enhance our natural environment, and finding that balance, which is always so hard. The government is changing legislation like that. It is moving at one heck of a pace, and we're having to respond to that in a very, we'd prefer it to be in a very proactive manner, but at the moment it's happening so fast, it tends to be in a reactive manner. We're continuing to build and develop and enhance how we work with our Māori, iwi and hapu in decision-making, those partnership obligations that I touched on before. Touched on the land and freshwater plan, which is the big ticket item. But adapting to climate change and how we address that as a region, and that then leads into what we do in the public transport space. So clearly over the next generation or so, we're going to have to move away from our dependence on private vehicles into alternative transport modes. And one of those will be public transport. So those conversations, but they're intergenerational conversations that need to occur. And that huge investment we've made in biosecurity and biodiversity over the last 5 or 6 years, government funding is eroding for that. And so we need to have some conversations and discussions with the community. What do we want to do with those investments we've made to date? Do we want to protect them? Do we want to enhance them? Do we want to step back? All those conversations need to occur because they all have impacts on budgets and rates. So we've got an election, some subtleties of differences. Regional councils have constituencies where district councils have wards, and once you're elected, you're sworn in, you do your declarations, you're obliged to act in the best interests of the whole region, not just the constituency you represent. So it's quite a different focus and way of thinking. We've got the 5 constituencies, and I'll come on to those with the map in a second. But we also have the Māori constituency poll in the same way that Stratford District has the Māori ward poll. So these are our current constituencies. So we have one Taranaki Māori constituency, which is the whole region, one councillor in that space, and that's what the poll is for the next 2 elections, depending on the outcome of that binding poll. Then we have, we've split the region into 4 constituencies, largely around similar population numbers and having similar councillors for the same sorts of numbers of people. So here in Stratford is that light blue wedge in the middle. Other than the Republic of Wallamomona, we align with the Stratford District Council boundaries. Regional council boundaries are based on water catchments, so that's why we've got that difference. That area there is part of the Wanganui catchment and falls under the Horizons Regional Council responsibilities. So we've got one councillor here in Stratford, two in South Taranaki, and we've split the New Plymouth Rohe into two. So we've got the urban area down through Okato, which is that darker blue area, and we've got 5 councillors there. And we've split out the rural area, Englewood, Waitara North, and they've got 2 councillors there. Very deliberate decisions to split those up. So if you didn't, you'd get a huge predominance and of people coming from that New Plymouth urban area, just making decisions on behalf of the whole region. What's your commitment? Very, very similar. The council is the policy body. It develops strategy, policy, makes and then sends the operational arm of the organisation to go and deliver. And then they're monitoring how well we do on that delivery. We've got a 6-weekly cycle for the main council and committees, 3 to 4 times a year for the other joint committees. Most meetings average about 2 hours in time, but there's a lot of preparation time. An awful lot of reading and an awful lot of quite technical scientific reading. We try and make that as accessible as possible. And easy to digest and understand, but you will spend a lot of time reading and if necessary coming talking to the officers to get that deeper understanding. And of course there's a range of functions, training, conferences and inductions, very similar to Stratford. Post-election through to Christmas, you'll be heavily involved in inductions and those sorts of things. So there'll be quite a significant time commitment in the first 2 or 3 months. All our meetings are governed by standing orders, which gives meetings a level of formality, but we also try and encourage broad discussions to get that wide range of views that we're trying to attract. So we do have standing orders, we do have some formalities, but we try and encourage reasonably open, free conversations to occur through meetings. Agendas are all electronic nowadays. We provide, similar to Stratford, we provide iPads or laptops and internet connections and all that sort of thing. So as an environmental agency, we don't send out reams and reams of paper. You're working for a bigger team, and again, that concept of working for the benefit of the whole region, not just your constituency. This is our current remuneration, exactly the same rules set by the Remuneration Authority. The chairperson's remuneration is set by the authority, and they provide a pool for everybody, all the rest of the councillors, and they get allocated. Again, there's a base minimum, 38,000, and the council decided that the base minimum with no additional responsibilities will be just short of 41,000, and they've allocated some additional responsibilities money for the chairs of the different committees. One difference here in Stratford, you elect your mayor. Regional councils, every district elects their representatives, and they then choose their chairperson. So there's no direct election for the chairperson of the regional council. So post the election, the Remuneration Authority's just come out and declared these to be the post-election remuneration figures. So the chair will be on 118.5. The minimum for a councillor with no additional responsibilities is 39.6, and we've got a pool of 500,000 to allocate any other additional responsibilities or whatever. So there wasn't a big change this year from last year's remuneration. So I imagine you'll be the council will probably end up at similar levels to where they currently are.